So I had this revelation just yesterday. Picking up my daughter, my partner and I, we are both therapists, authors. We work from home, and so right around 4:30, we either check in to see who's going to pick up our daughter, or we both pick up our daughter. And I think we enjoy doing it, right? So we both want to do it. It doesn't feel like a chore. So the routine is getting into a car, picking up our daughter around 4:30, me getting perhaps an afternoon cappuccino on the way down. And so we pick her up, and of course she gets excited seeing both mom and dad waiting for her. She gets in the car, we're driving back home, and she says, "I want Asahi." And I'm like, "What the fuck?" And I had this moment. She's demand. We're gonna do it, of course, right? And so we're like, sure. And the Asahi place is right down the street. Um, Goji berries on the side. By the way, this is a kid who I think at age 2 we were in Palm Springs, and we were at this kind of like deli, and the server, who was like a little bit older, say 60s, was getting the drink order, and Logan said, "Excuse me, do you have a kombucha?" And I think he wanted to throw her. I think he wanted to punt her. 2 years old asking for kombucha, now 4.5 demanding Asahi after school. Anyway, I had the moment after buying her the Asahi. We're driving up back home, and I'm looking at her in the rear view as she inhales this exotic. Is it exotic? Asahi's an exotic dessert, right? Isn't it from Hawaii? Anyway, she's eating Asahi. Half her face is purple, and I'm like, fuck. When I was growing up, just the idea of my parents excited to pick me up from school, so they both get in the car, drive and pick me up, and then I get in the car and I demand, I don't know, whatever at the time was popular, frozen yogurt or a sundae, and then they take me to get it. And this isn't like a special occasion. This is like a, fucking Tuesday. And they take me to get, my favorite dessert, and then we all drive home as a family. And then I watch TV, as mom and dad gets ready for dinner. And I was like, wow, I don't know if that's ever happened to me. And I started thinking about my parents, because they were always at work. I mean, I basically walked home from school every day. Now, would they have done it if they had the means, right? So, like, if they didn't have to work their ass off, would they have done the same thing? Would they both pick me up from school? I don't know. Maybe at 5, maybe at 5 years old. I mean, definitely not at 15. And then I started thinking, well, my dad could argue and say, well, John, I grew up making my own shoes. I was so hungry that I would get plates thrown at my head for stealing rice. And here I am buying you Christian Hosoi skateboards and Levi's and McDonald's. And I thought to myself, because I had a moment in the car when we were coming home, like, are we spoiling our daughter? I can't believe, she gets this. She gets this kind of like wraparound parents that pick her up, and Asahi and on demand kombucha and sushi. And but then I thought to myself, it's all relative, because my parents could say the same thing about us in the 80s when we were demanding BMX bikes and fancy skateboards, you know? And I thought to myself, if you pull back, because it's usually in the trenches, right? So, like, if I decide to just focus on our daughter, what she's getting, the life that she has, right? All the privileges, I could judge it, and that could become very narrow. And then I could change my behavior based on looking at it through that lens, right? But if I pull back and I'm like, wait a minute, I had that version of her, even though I didn't get that in the 80s, I definitely had a version of that. And then if I look at it through my parents' lens, they had much less. And then if I go even back further and look at it through like my, grandparents, where they grew up war-stricken, I mean, poverty, then my parents had it so much better than them. And then I kind of see like collectively, I see cumulatively, I'm able to pull back. And then the judgments I had about that situation of both of us picking up our daughter, buying her a sari, like the judgment I had is suddenly gone. Do you know what I'm saying? And I'm sharing this because I think this is something we can do, this exercise, this practice of pulling back with anything. I'm just using the example today of picking up a sassy 4.5-year-old who demands a sahi, but it could be anything, and this reminds me of one of the kind of fundamentals of Buddhism. I know that when I'm in my trenches, when I'm in my distorted thought, when I'm in the slippery well, the world becomes narrow. When it doesn't matter what I'm thinking about, right? So I could be thinking about, say, my relationship. I'm only seeing it through my own lens, and there's going to be judgment because there's expectation. I'm seeing it through one angle, one perspective. Or if I think about my career, again, seeing it through my eyes, my story, my perspective, things could get very narrow, And if I'm able to pull back, if I'm able to not only pull back, but kind of try to see the 360. So, for example, by me thinking about this generationally, so like, what my parents had or didn't have, what their parents didn't have, and seeing it that way gives me more of a 360 view of the whole thing. And then it takes away the judgment, the labels, and both parents picking up a 5-year-old and buying her a sari is not that big of a deal. I mean, it's not like it's great. I value it, and I don't feel bad. I don't feel like we're spoiling her because I'm able to see kind of the 360, right? Does that make sense? Now, I think a lot of people, they'll say, especially today, parents, they'll say, "Oh, you don't know how good you have it because," and then they compare, the 80s or 90s, whenever you grew up, and the latchkey kids, and I don't know, 99-cent nachos was a privilege, a gift. We grew up eating cereal for dinner and all that, right? So it's very easy to go there, but then we don't actually then think about our parents, what they didn't have, the tools they didn't have, the information they didn't have, the training, the education, like all of that, right? And so my point is to see the 360 of any situation or anything, to try to see the 360. And by doing so, you have to practice pulling back. So whether you're in a situation right now with whatever, with work, with relationships, friendships, I don't know, with family, whatever you're going through, and we're all going through something, what would that look like to you? What would that look like to you to actually look at the 360 instead of just seeing it through your own lens where it's narrow and there's judgment? Because I think this is what mindfulness looks like. I think this is what this is what perspective looks like. I think this is how we can spin less, get out of our heads, right? I'm trying to give a personal example. If you take, say, career, it seems like relationships, like love and career, are like the big things that a lot of people struggle with. So if you take career, right? If I take my career, for example, I always think I'm not there yet. I like it's in the fiber of my being. It's been conditioned in me, especially growing up here in Los Angeles, where I haven't like hit the bell. I haven't gotten to the island. I'm still climbing. And, I started this whole thing after being a quote unquote failed screenwriter, starting a new career, going back to therapy school, becoming a therapist. And like back then, the idea of even selling one book was a dream, right? Now I'm on book 6. I have a brand new book coming out, and I still have that feeling that I'm the almost guy, you know? Now, if I was to go back 15 years ago when I was going through my rebirth and rebuilding my life and I didn't have much, and I said, John, hang in there. It's going to take a while, but you're going to publish 6+ books, you know, and you're going to have a couple podcasts and you're going to be doing retreats or whatever. You're going to be doing all these things. I would have been like, holy shit, really? Oh my God, that's it. I have arrived. If that's true, I have nothing to worry about. And yet here today, my body doesn't feel like I'm there. My body doesn't feel like I've arrived. You know what I'm saying? And so it's never going to. So it doesn't matter what's on paper. It doesn't matter what I've built or how far I've come or how many, how big my audience is, or like none of that matters. The running engine unconsciously will always be the same. And so when I get to where I want to go now because of the goals that I have today, then at that point, I'm still not going to feel like I've made it. And so one of the things I can do today is to really pull back. And again, the 360 and the distance, right? Like instead of just thinking about this project or where I'm at in this chapter of my life, pull back and look at my entire story. And so for me, I mean, 15 years ago, or even back to when I was working in nonprofit and was wearing a uniform and taking kids grocery shopping. Now I know that was really important work, probably the most important work I've ever done in this field. And yet at the time I hated it and I was like so embarrassed of it. And I thought like I went and got a master's and I didn't want to, that's not what I signed up for, right? But the universe threw me there. And to know that that's where I was, and now the freedom I have to even like do things like pick up my daughter, right? Because I make my own schedule. What a gift and a privilege. And it actually shows like I've built a life that is custom to me. That was always the dream, right? To work in a way that was honest to me. And I feel like I'm doing that now, but I'm not able to see it because I'm being so narrow and just focusing on what's happening now instead of pulling back and seeing how far I've come, right? Seeing the 360. So one of the things that I'm working on and what I'm encouraging you to work on as well is to stay out of the trenches by seeing the bigger picture, and also if you can tell what's going to happen in the future by past patterns, well, the pattern is I have been, building and growing and evolving and experimenting and doing all these things. And that's probably not going to stop, right? There has been a trajectory, right? I have been climbing a mountain. Why would that stop? Technology is not going to stop it. I mean, there could be drops, right? I could go up and down, but it's cumulative. There's an ebb and flow, and chances are that's not going to stop as long as I continue to be me, And so trusting your story, but also trusting how you are by the patterns. I mean, I could go as far back as when I was 12 playing with Legos, my favorite toy back then, for hours and forgetting to eat and just hitting flow states with building blocks, right? I could trace the stuff I'm doing now with podcast content, social media, to the days of when I was 12. And so it's not about the platforms. It's about how you're wired and how you've been conditioned. And if I trust that, like that's not going to stop, right? And if I trust that, and if I trust my story, then I feel like I have more of an accurate view. I'm not judging myself in the situation and where I'm at. I'm pulling back and seeing something bigger. And then the result of that is I feel more calm. I have more hope. I have less panic. So it changes my state. And I think by changing my state, then I start to attract more, right? I'm not in a state of desperation, fight or flight, and chasing. So I don't know if that helps, but I'm learning more. I'm learning more and more that in this life, however you get there, if you're able to stay calm, and by that I mean grounded. I mean calm in an authentic way, like grounded, peace, finding peace. Um, the way that we do that is, I mean, it varies, but for some it may be drawing boundaries. For some it may be not answering the phone, or I don't know, asking for more money at work. I don't know what peace looks like for you. But finding peace and groundedness, trusting your story, creating distance, all of that, getting the 360 instead of looking at situations through your own lenses. So all of this as a practice really gets you to live on a higher frequency. And I think if you're on that frequency, if you're on that plane for long enough, good shit starts to happen. Not only good shit starts to happen, like good things in your life and opportunities, but I think you evolve. I think this is where you start to grow, you know, on this plane, because we're not growing in fight or flight or panic, or if we think the sky is falling, because we're in survival mode. We're holding up shields and just trying to live. That's not where we grow. We grow on the higher plane where we're not in that state, where we are in more of a thriving state, a through me state, a for me state, not a to me state, which is victim mode. Ask yourself what's required for you to live on a higher plane these days. It could be daily practices, like everything from ice baths to workouts to, the obvious. But it could also be this, right? Shift in perspective, taking a beat, looking at things, flipping things on its head. Anyway, thank you for listening. Before I go, speaking of books, my sixth book, Breakup on Purpose, A Catalyst for Growth, is out. You can find it on Amazon. The angle I took with this book is there is no one fits all for breakups. And I thought to myself before writing this book, why haven't we dissected the different types of breakups? So in this book, I talk about the 8 different types of breakups, and I kind of named them myself, like the flat soda breakup, the breakup that should have happened years ago, the Telemundo soap opera, I need a restraining order breakup, right? We've all been through one of those. Also the D word, divorce, because that breakup is very complicated and has many more layers, especially if you have children and property, than a regular breakup. Anyway, so check out the book. You can find it on Amazon, or go to bit.ly/breakup on purpose. And I'm launching a Single on Purpose app, and we're gonna all do a breakup book club together in there. So look out for that. Thank you for listening. Be well.